So I've been back at the boat and I made some cardboard templates for flat panels that I basically need made out of fiberglass. And then I used that to cut out pieces of honeycomb core. And now I'm cutting pieces of fiberglass to go over the core. And this piece here that I'm working on will be the shelf that goes at the very front of the pontoon in the spot where I shaved that flotation foam flat to make room for a shelf. And it doesn't need to carry a lot of weight, so this is just one layer of 3/4 inch chopped strand mat on each side of the honeycomb core. And I've come back in about 45 minutes after laying this up, and I can the resin has started to get kind of rubbery, but it's still easy to cut with a razor knife, which is a whole lot easier than grinding it off later after the resin hardened. And I did one side and just let it get tacked off, and then flipped it over and did the other side. So what was the first side that I did is what I'm working on now, and it's still soft enough that I can cut it with the razor knife. It also helps that it's such thin fiberglass. But that saves a lot of time compared to grinding it. And I've got these pieces of fiberglass left over from cutting a doorway in another bulkhead. And I need to put fiberglass on 2 of these mini bulkheads, which will go underneath the sleeping berth that will be at the back of the pontoon. So I start by wetting out the scrim on the honeycomb core, and there'll be 3 layers of 1708 fiberglass on these to make them very strong. And I wet out the chopped strand mat side and then flip it over and put it on the core that has already been wetted out. You always want the chopped strand mat side down, and it helps to wet it out before you lay it down. And the middle layer is made up of little pieces because I didn't have enough of the scraps to make like 3 full layers for both pieces. So there's a full sheet on the bottom, and then a middle layer made of little pieces, and then a full sheet on the top. And while this is still wet, I'm going to toss it out of the way without disturbing the glass on top of it. And I can do basically the same thing with the second mini bulkhead. There'll be a full sheet on the bottom, and then a layer of small pieces, and then a layer with the biggest pieces that were left. For each layer, I use a bubble buster to get the bubbles out. And this piece here is going to be a walkway, a floor, going forward, where the floor now is just bilge that goes to sort of a V at the bottom of the hull. And so this will be a walkway going forward of the door in the forward bulkhead, going towards that deck hatch that goes to the front deck. And since this is going to be walked on and needs to be fairly strong, I'm putting 1 layer of 1708 on each side of this. And that should be plenty strong enough to walk on this piece. especially since it's so narrow. And here I am, I'm also laying up the other side of those two mini bulkheads. And again, there's a middle layer that's made of little pieces, and then usually larger pieces for the top layers. With the 1708, you really almost have to wet out the bottom part, the chopped strand mat first, before flipping it over and laying it down. Otherwise, it's very hard to get if you're using just a roller, it's very hard to get the resin to go all the way through the fiberglass and wet out the chopped strand mat underneath the layer of woven glass. So these have all been fiberglass, and I need to grind the edges, and I use those little pieces of styrofoam to block this up off of the driveway so that my cutting wheel won't hit the concrete. And so the edges of pretty much all these pieces that I've made will have to be, they've got fiberglass hanging out over the edge of the core, past where the part should be. So they're all getting ground back to the edge of the core. Oh, and this piece will be a step going up to the forward hatch. When you walk on top of that walkway piece and you get to the front, then the deck hatch is above you. And this will be a step that you can put your foot on, and then there's another place where you could step higher up, but there was a missing step, basically.